It seems most drug makers are making their biggest sales to doctors by pushing medicines for some common conditions, whether they be statins for cholesterol or proton pump inhibitors for heartburn. But drugs can actually take on blockbuster significance for specialized treatment groups where treatment options are limited. Welcome to the Clinicians Roundtable on ReachMD, XM Channel 157, the channel for medical professionals. I'm Bruce Japsen, the healthcare reporter for the Chicago Tribune, and with me today is Jeffrey Aronin, who's the chairman, CEO, and president of Ovation Pharmaceuticals, Inc. Prior to founding Ovation in 2000, Mr. Aronin led Medcare Technologies, a publicly traded healthcare company where he served as chairman and CEO. His experience also includes various executive positions at American Health Products Corporation and also Carter Wallace, a Fortune 500 company where he held various management positions within its pharmaceutical division. Welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, Bruce.
The interesting thing about Ovation is that Ovation focuses on very complex diseases that few are focused on. And if you could give us a little history about how this started, because you founded this company, it seems like only yesterday, but it's been a few years now, and how you guys have made this commitment to addressing very difficult diseases and ensuring that company medications get to the patients who need them, which does not seem to me that that would be an easy task.
Certainly isn't. Actually, if you think back just here in Chicago and around the country, pharmaceutical companies have continued to merge and get larger, and there's a lot of benefits so that many of the largest drugs can be developed and invested in. We've had some very important drugs discovered and put to market because of that. But at the same time, a drug that was once important to a smaller drug company or a mid-sized pharma company that has merged is not as important. And when I started Ovation, my history had been in developing some of these mid-sized drugs that no longer may have been the target of some of the biggest drug companies. And I recognized there was a real need in patient populations. And Ovation has continued to develop these drugs. We now have products in 87 countries and over 20 drugs, and we currently have many drugs, including many orphan and rare disease drugs that we are continuing to develop and try to innovate.
And could you give us an example of what some of these drugs are? I remember, some of your first deals, Abbott Labs was a company that was in transition, and to sort of get their financial operation going, they wanted to focus on high-growth areas of stents, and they have their rheumatoid arthritis drug. And so some drugs that they had that were good drugs, they just didn't have the time to focus on. So I remember, if you could, tell us a little bit about some of the early days and some of these drugs and kind of, where they were and where you've taken them.
Certainly. Very fortunately, we've been able to target some of these populations where these patients often don't have a lot of hope. There aren't drugs being developed in areas that they need products. So what we've done is we've tried to identify the areas that patients need products and that there aren't a lot of alternatives, and there needs to be products developed in these areas. And what we've done is primarily developed new innovative drugs in these areas. And we've done this in several ways. First is we have developed them internally. What we've also done is, as a company may have switched its attention and found out that a drug which they had discovered was no longer going to be a blockbuster potential because maybe it had a side effect or it didn't work in the broader area, they shelved it. But we may have identified that that product would work well in a smaller population or a higher need population. And we then took that product, as we did with some of the products from Abbott that you mentioned, and we ended up developing and working with the FDA to trying to get these drugs approved through phase 2, phase 3, and then approved. And we've done quite a bit of that. In fact, many of the drugs that we were early on developing are now approved throughout the world and in the United States. And many we are still developing, which it is a long and expensive process, and it's very rewarding for us and the patient populations when these new therapies become available, but it does take a lot of time.
Could you give us an example? You can go ahead and finish your thought, but also give us an example of the areas, because I know neurology is one area.
Yeah, our main focus is in the central nervous system as well as oncology. Those are two of our focuses, and Some products that we have in these areas are, one of which is a drug that we've been trying to develop now for many years, and it should be approved this year, is for infantile spasms, which is a rare form of epilepsy, which is very debilitating. It can be hundreds of seizures a day for infants, and you can imagine how devastating that can be on a family. This drug we expect to be approved this year, which is called Sabril. That's the type of product that we were developing. Another, as you mentioned before, with the Abbott acquisition, we acquired a product called Panhematin, which is for a rare disease called porphyria. We're now studying that in many other indications and trying to expand the availability of this product to patient populations who don't have other therapies available.
Well, if you're just joining us, or even if you're new to our channel, you're listening to the Clinicians Roundtable on ReachMD XM 157. I'm Bruce Japsen of the Chicago Tribune, and joining me today is Jeffrey Aronin. He's the Chief Executive Officer and one of the founders of Ovation Pharmaceuticals. And if you haven't heard of Ovation, they're doing some very interesting things in the North Chicago suburbs relative to drugs that a lot of big companies didn't really have time to focus on. A lot of large pharmaceutical companies are focusing on the billion-dollar blockbusters, and we're talking about how Ovation is focusing primarily in two areas of the central nervous system and in the cancer area of some products that go to maybe a smaller population but are just as important nonetheless. And if I could ask you, Jeff, is this a growth area for you? I mean, it seems like some of these drug companies aren't regretting selling you some of these products, given that the big pharma is having all these problems with the patent expirations. But tell us a little bit about some more of your products and also perhaps where the company may be headed in this arena and where doctors, quite frankly, would be able to find out about these. Because let's face it, big pharma, they've got armies of sales reps out there that I would think that when you're targeting a smaller population, you wouldn't necessarily see.
That's correct, Bruce. While big pharma focuses on very often the primary care markets and the larger patient populations, which you do need a broader sales organization, more of a marketing arm, our products are very specialized and very targeted to certain physician populations. For example, neurologists or psychiatrists or oncologists are just a few of the areas that we work with, as well as neonatologists. We have a couple products in neonatology. So because of that, it's very difficult to certainly develop these drugs and often manufacture them, given the size and efficiency to do smaller products. But one of the advantages that we do have is it is different in that these patient populations, you don't need to do as much education to a broader group because it is a very targeted group of physicians who are prescribing it. And they often will know about that there's only a few options available, and that's what we're trying to do is give physicians more options and develop products in these specialized markets.
Yeah, that is interesting. Could you tell us a little about, like in the central nervous system, for example, some of the products that you have? You mentioned one of them earlier, and also perhaps where some of these doctors will see some more products, especially given these are disease states for which patients may run out of options, unfortunately.
Sure. As we've talked about, we focus on some of these, not only, like for example, in neurology, not only epilepsy is an area of focus for us, it's usually niches within epilepsy. So in epilepsy, we have a drug called Sabril, which we're developing now for infantile spasms. We have a drug we're developing for Lennox-Gastaut, another rare disease in epilepsy. And we have on the market several drugs in neurology. So we're already, in fact, at this time, Ovation, while they're not the largest products by any means, we have more drugs for epilepsy than any company in the world. It's these targeted markets where there really isn't other available products that we've really strived to focus on.
And what about cancer? Because cancer, I mean, there is, unfortunately, a lot of trial and error out there, and I'm certain in cancer, you, of course, have, the subspecialties are growing, and so that would also seem to be an area, if you could talk about some of your products in the oncology arena. The
oncology, it's a very important area for us. We have a drug for Wilms tumor. We have several products in the pediatric cancer area. So many of our drugs will be focused more on pediatric cancer and the targeted markets in there. We currently have, with our drugs in cancer, we have 14,000 patients in trials and being studied with our products alone around the world. So it is an important, many of those trials are physician-initiated, some are we are doing, but many are trials around the world. This is an area that we have a lot of hope for. We see one of our drugs, panhematin, we are now studying in for myelodysplasia syndrome, MDS, a form of cancer. So we're taking drugs that we have and expanding them into other high-need markets.
Well, this is very interesting. And also, do you see perhaps other areas where there are these needs where there are not products or there are subsets of patient populations that you might get into? We've talked about central nervous system and cancer. Are there potential other areas? I'm sure there probably are, but I don't know if Ovation is looking at them.
There are, and there's several companies such as Genzyme who are also focused in these markets. For us, central nervous system and oncology are really our focus, and the neonatology space, the hospital space. And there are a lot of products in those areas that we certainly can be developing and continue to add to our pipeline. And I believe the future of medicine will continue to be more, for drug development at least, I think it will be more targeted, and we're starting to see that and more focused on these specialty patient populations and specialty markets as we continue to expand.
Well, with that, I would like to thank Jeffrey Aronin, who has been our guest. He's the President and Chief Executive Officer of Ovation Pharmaceuticals, a company that is focusing on treating very complex diseases that few other companies, quite frankly, are focused on. I'm Bruce Japsen of the Chicago Tribune, your host on ReachMD XM 157. We welcome your comments and questions about today's show through our website at reachmd.com, which now features our entire medical show library and on-demand podcasts. And I'd like to thank you today for listening.
Thank you for listening to ReachMD XM 157, the channel for medical professionals. If you're interested in learning about sponsorship and advertising opportunities, please contact Paul Boydie at 312-330-3465 or via email at connect@reachmd.com. ReachMD XM 157, on air, online, and on demand, provide the healthcare professional community with unprecedented access to timely and informative content relevant to their specialty. Contact us at 312-330-3465 or at connect@reachmd.com. Healthcare professionals tune in to ReachMD to stay current, knowledgeable, and connected. Whether it's in the car, at the gym, or office, ReachMD XM 157 is accessible. Learn how you can utilize the ReachMD XM 157 multi-channel platform to broaden the reach of your professional communications message. Call Paul Boydie at 312-330-3465 or via email at connect@reachmd.com.